3.1i, we will need to elect a person to preside if the Mayor is not present. Please can I have a nomination for a councillor to preside as Chair of this meeting?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Sheila Peacock, the Deputy Mayor, to chair this meeting. Okay, now.
Okay, councillors, it's agreed for Councillor Sheila Peacock to chair the meeting.
Please be seated. Right, now I'll start with the most boring part of the whole meeting, and that's I've got to read out filming of meetings. Please note there's no scheduled fire alert, and if you do hear a fire alarm, please follow the advice of the security officers here this evening. Please note that this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the Council for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site, or by anyone attending the meeting using any communication method. Although we ask members of the public recording, filming or reporting on the meeting not to include the public seating areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware that we cannot guarantee that you will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Members of the public participating in the meeting, for example, making deputations, asking questions, making oral protests, should be aware that they are likely to be filmed, recorded or reported on. By entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. As chair of the meeting, I have the discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording. If, in my opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the Council. To receive apologies for absence.
Deputy Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Adamu, Ossamore, Dennison, Ross, Davis, and apologies for lateness from Councillors Moyed and Hakata.
Thank you.
Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, apologies. Councillor,
You're quite right, Reg. Thank you very much.
Councillor Min had also indicated to me that she was running late, stuck in traffic. Oh, she's here. That's great. Thank you very much.
Item 3, to ask the Mayor to consider the admission of any late items for urgent business.
Deputy Mayor, there are 4 late items of business which could not be available earlier and which will need to be dealt with at this meeting. Item 9, appointment to outside bodies. This report was late in order to allow confirmation of amendments to appointments with the organisations indicated in Appendix A. Items 11A and 11B were late in order to take account of meetings that have occurred in the last week. And item 14, questions and written answers. The reason for lateness is that notice of questions is not requested until 8 clear days before the meeting, following which the matters raised have to be researched and replies prepared to be given at the meeting.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Would anybody like to declare an interest? No? To receive the minutes of the Council, may I call on the Chief Executive?
Meeting held on the 24th of May 2018.
Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 6, to receive such communications as the Mayor may lay before the Council. Sweating. Excuse me a minute. I'm sweating so much it's running into my eyes. I don't know if anybody else is hot. Oh. Oh, dear me. This is one hot place to be in, I tell you. Anyway, I'm reading it out on behalf of the Mayor. And the Mayor to date has attended 44 events and functions throughout the borough and the City of London since she became the Mayor on the 24th of May 2014, with my Deputy covering a further 15 engagements. I would like to thank my Deputy Mayor for her continued support and commitment to the borough. Yeah. Can I just say that I've actually done 6 this week as well. So, on Wednesday the 30th of May, the Mayor attended the graduation ceremony of HARINGEY Entrepreneurship Bursary Programme of Westminster Business School, where she was very impressed to hear of the benefits gained by the diverse HARINGEY residents participating in this 5-month-long entrepreneurial scheme. On Saturday, the 2nd of June, she was invited to the big iftar event at Whiteman Road Mosque and shown some of the work of the mosque in the community and to talk to some of the users. On Friday, the 8th of June, she attended another iftar meal at Caxton Road Mosque and met some of the users there. On Sunday, the 10th of June, she attended Cyprus Day at St Barnabas Church. On Monday, the 11th of June, she went to Tottenham Green Leisure Centre to wave off a group of local pensioners on their way to Blackpool. Can I just intercede there? It was a group of my pensioners who went to Pensioners' Parliament in Blackpool, and I actually posted a photograph of them on Facebook. And they had a wonderful time. On Thursday, the 14th of June, she was invited to the first part of Mind in Haringey's AGM, where she met some of the volunteers. On Friday, the 15th of June, she attended Haringey 5K My Way event, encouraging council staff to get exercising and move a bit. On Sunday, the 17th of June, she attended the listening campaign and celebrating Refugee Week event at Gravesmore Community School and met with some of the users of the Shrespa programme, that's Albanian for Hope, an organisation that runs to advance the education and training of the Albanian-speaking people in the UK. On Tuesday, the 19th of June, she visited the Blanche Neville School for their annual GCSE Arts and Design. I don't know if anybody knows, but Blanche Neville School used to be based in Bruce Grove, in Phillip Lane, and then it moved and is now part of Fortismere Complex. So if any of you are governors of Fortismere, you should also try and visit Blanche Neville as well, which is a school for the deaf. And then she went on to the LMA's new mayor's reception in Westminster. On Wednesday, the 20th of June, she attended the Haynes Dementia Hub relaunch. On Monday, the 25th of June, she raised the Armed Forces Day flag outside the Civic Centre to mark Armed Forces Week. We carry on. On the 26th of June, she visited Channing School, which is a public school, to celebrate International Women in Engineering Day, and later went on to Canel for a graduation event. On the 28th of June, she attended the Haringey Voluntary Aided Head Teachers Association, and then went on to the newly refurbished athletics track event in Finsbury Park. On Saturday, the 30th of June, she attended Founders' Day service at Channing School again, and then went on to an annual concert at Christchurch in Tottenham. Sunday, the 1st of July, she took the salute from the Youth in Uniform parade when the cadets marched past the Civic Centre. The cadets then paraded outside the Civic Centre and she presented prizes to the winning cadets. The cadets, actually, it was a very hot day, and it was the police cadets, the army cadets, the navy cadets, the marine cadets, and there was loads of cadets. It was really most impressive, and I was there and I presented an award also. On Monday, the 2nd of July, she attended the Junior Citizens event in Scouts Park. On Wednesday, the 4th of July, she was invited to be a guest judge at Canel on the First Given Finals charity that runs programmes that encourages students to be socially conscious whilst developing the skills such as the ability to research, speak publicly and present. And later in the evening, she went on to visit Haringey Young Musicians School's picnic concert in Finsbury Park. On Thursday, the 5th of July, she attended the Whittington Big Tea event in celebration of the National Health Service 70th birthday. And on Saturday, the 7th of July, she was invited to attend graduation ceremony held in Tottenham Town Hall for Benner Training and Assessment Centre. And then later in the evening, she went on to Hornsey Carnival Party. On Sunday, the 8th of July, she attended the 42nd anniversary celebration of Mauritius Hindu Association. And then I think she was taken ill. But I now go on to the death of Pam Moffat. For those who don't know her, Pam Moffat was a veteran, a disability rights campaigner. She had the MBE and she passed away peacefully at home on Friday the 8th of June 2018. She was an absolute wonderful lady. She was in a wheelchair. She could actually do nothing for herself and had to have a full-time carer. But she still maintained her presence at all meetings. She was absolutely wonderful. She had motor neuron disease, and she combated that for many, many years. And she, with me, founded the Haringey Forum for Older People. I now call on Councillor Kirsten Hearn to speak.
Right, okay. I met Pam about 1,000 years ago as a young whipper-snapper, me not her, of a campaigner. My delectation was to chain myself to buses. Hers was to persuade people with the force of her words to do the right thing. we made quite a good team, often appearing at either ends of tables at meetings or at events, trying to work to make changes. And I think between the two of us and some other people, we may have chosen different methods for doing it, but the effect was the same. I was very pleased to be involved, and she was very happy to hear that we had made all our buses low-floor and accessible in London, the biggest fleet of low-floor buses in the world. And Pam had a huge effect on making that happen with her constant campaigning about it, pointing out how difficult it was to get from A to B if you couldn't actually go up steps. And she would not be stopped, even though she was often quite tired and exhausted by things. Somehow she seemed to find an energy, possibly stimulated by extreme crossness at the unfairness of the world that excluded people because of lack of access. And I was so pleased to know her all these years, and very delighted last year, I think it was, to be with her at a meeting of the pensioners group about disability rights. And though we have very different perspectives, I think we were harmoniously together in wanting to make the world a better place. I'm hoping that Pam is sitting in some other place now, singing rebel disability rights songs, one of which I taught her. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you all now to stand for a minute's silence in respect of Pam? Thank you very much. Item 7, report to the Chief Executive.
Deputy Mayor, I have no matters to report.
Item 8, report to the Monitoring Officer.
Deputy Mayor, I also have no matters to report.
Item 9, appointments to outside bodies. I will pause for a few seconds as councillors return to the main screen on their modern Gov app, so you can access this paper. So we'll just have a little bit of a wait. Those of you who have brought your computers with you. Okay, I accept this as the last business. I call on the Chief Whip to move the motion.
Thanks very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just very quickly, just before I move this report, I'd just like to say a couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to wish the Leader of the Council a very happy birthday for today, so happy birthday, Leader of the Council. I'd also like to place on record that today marks the third anniversary of the death of former Councillor George Meehan, and whatever side of the political divide you're on, you can't help but recognise the immense impact he had on the people of Haringey and how much he cared for the people of Haringey. So I'd like to place my record thanks to George for all his work, and may rest in peace. The other thing I'd like to say is to apologise to those councillors who have had a bit of a hokey-cokey with the outside bodies. It doesn't matter if you've been a councillor for 1 year or 18 years, this has been a learning curve for me, so I'd like to apologise for those people who were put on outside bodies. Actually, in one instance, turned up to a meeting and then was told, actually, that that's not going to be the case, you're not going to be on that outside body. So I'd like to apologise to those members. Hopefully it's all smoothed out now, and we will review the outside bodies process for next year. I'd like to move the amendments as laid out in the report. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 10, to consider requests to receive deputations and or petitions, and if approved, to receive them. I've accepted one deputation to this evening, a meeting from Citizens UK. I call on Susanna Benavides and David Smoleria, who are joined by Michael Pugh, Sonia Rendon and Elizabeth Gomez, and they have 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening. My name is Susana Benavides. I go to St. Ignatius Church in Tottenham, and I am proud union workers living wage in Haringey. I have been campaigning for the living wage with the Citizen UK and my trade union for 3 years. Tonight, I am asking for Haringey Council to become a credit living wage employer with the Living Wage Foundation. I have lived in Haringey for 5 years. I used to have two cleaning jobs and working for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. I live in poor quality housing with a living up to 12 families in the same property. I struggle to pay the bills. I put food in the table for my 3 children. I was even fired from the one on my job for campaigning for the London living wage. But I know the London living wage is my ticket for better life, where I could work less hours, afford better housing, and spend more time with my children and invest in their future. My life has now changed for the better. Thank you for the living wage campaign, but unfortunately the house is more like the living wage in poverty in Haringey. And the Haringey Council has responsibility to change this.
So my name is Father David Smolera, and I'm the parish priest of St. Ignatius in South Tottenham, where Susanna attends. We've a very diverse parish of about 3,500 people who come to Mass there, including a large Polish, Latin American, African and Caribbean community. Susanna's right. In fact, 26% of Haringey residents earn below the London living wage of £10.20 per hour. And as you know, more than a third of the borough are living in poverty. And many of those people worship at my church. That's why I decided to make the parish a living wage employer a number of years ago and get involved in the campaign to get other employers to do the right thing by their employees. Sadly, however, my church is only one of 20 organisations so far accredited for the London living wage in our borough. And the biggest employer in our borough who is not accredited is this council. This council is now one of the few Labour-led authorities in London not to be accredited with the Living Wage Foundation. And this leaves thousands of subcontracted council staff, particularly those in social care, being paid below the London living wage. If the council is not a living wage employer, it makes it very difficult for you to promote the living wage in the borough. So what does accreditation with the Living Wage Foundation mean? Well, we welcome the fact that the council pays all of its directly employed staff a London living wage, and that, as I understand it, recently the council signed up to Unison's Ethical Care Charter. But accreditation with the London Living Wage Foundation means that the opportunity for putting in place a practical plan to move the third-party subcontracted staff to the London living wage too becomes much more possible. We understand this will cost money and that it cannot happen overnight. But we at Haringey Citizens would like to work alongside the Council, Unison and the Living Wage Foundation to support you in putting in place a long-term plan for the promotion of the living wage, which would build in milestones and move those subcontracted staff contracts to the living wage over time. If these timelines can be agreed in the coming months, it would mean Haringey Council could become accredited in time for this year's Living Wage Week, which takes place every November. By signing up as an accredited living wage employer, this council will not only improve the lives of its employees, but its leadership will have a ripple effect in encouraging other organisations in the borough.
Hello? Can I ask you please to wind up, because as you see the red light is on.
Just a couple of moments, thank you. To improve the London living wage, but its leadership will have a ripple effect in encouraging other organisations in the borough and outside to become living wage employers too. Thank you very much.
Could I ask someone to go there and switch off that microphone, please?
Beg your pardon?
And could you just stay there, perhaps, both of you? Because I'm going to ask the councillors if anybody wants to ask them a question. Are there any questions for the deputation party? Councillor Bull?
Yes, I have a question. I was listening with interest to what the lady had to say about working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the living conditions that you're in. So in recognising the role of the council in terms of addressing the issue of living wage, would you also agree that it's important for the local authority to make a commitment to build genuine affordable housing so that those people on a lower wage, a lower income, don't have all of their money zapped up by some of these terrible private landlords who force people to live in atrocious conditions for extortionate rent? So would you agree with me that in addition to commitment about the London living wage, it's also very important that the council makes the commitment that it has made about genuine affordable housing so we can house as many of our residents in genuine affordable housing as possible and in good quality housing? Thank you.
Before I ask you to come back, I'll just ask if anybody else wants to ask a question.
No.
Does it? Councillor Rice?
Yeah, thank you. I hear you, Father, say that your church is pays a living wage. Can I ask whether this extends to members of the clergy?
Councillor Bevan?
Yeah, I think it's well known that employers who pay the London living wage achieve many, many extra benefits from their staff and the way their businesses operate and become more efficient. Would you like to clarify and explain some of those additional benefits that employers achieve by paying the London living wage?
And a question?
It's not so much a
Can
question.
you stand, please?
Yep. It's not so much a question as just to place on record my incredible respect for Susanna, who is my union comrade and who I've fought many battles for the living wage alongside. And she is very much worthy of our utter respect for what she's done. Thank you.
And Councillor Barbara Blake.
Well, thank you very much for coming this evening and giving your very informative speeches. I absolutely support the London living wage, but what worries me is the growth that we're seeing of self-employed within the borough. People who are working 16 hours a week, doing a bit of cleaning, you know, for themselves as self-employed. And I just wondered what you thought about that, because it seems to me that there are a lot of people in that situation on the poverty line that are increasingly out of the reach of trade unions and organisations such as yourselves.
Can I ask you to respond briefly, please?
We were living with a landlord who was and how he treated you.
I'm so sorry, I don't speak very well English. And the landlord is too exploitation for us because, we have here, we stay a lot of people here, the immigrants, and that is the reason I need to allot properties, and that is the reason they are lots of exploitation and a boost for a lot of money, because the London is very expensive, and for one bedroom I was paid for 700 a month. I live with my 3 children in there. It's so difficult for us. That is the reason I work in too much hours for day, because one job is only for rent, and we need to look up for another job for the food and transport, everything.
So just to very briefly try and respond to those questions, I mean, certainly there are a large number of rogue landlords out in Haringey and elsewhere, and that issue needs to be addressed, and there needs to be more affordable housing, but also there needs to be addressed how those rogue landlords are policed adequately so they don't take advantage of vulnerable people. With respect to the clergy, I can't speak for other clergy in Haringey, but I can say that there's an ecumenical group of clergy from the Methodist Church and from the Anglican Church, as well as the Catholic Church, all of whom are members of Citizens, and all of whom are working together to improve the lot of Haringey citizens. With respect to the self-employed, I mean, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to give an adequate answer, except that I have serious concerns about the number of people who are working very small numbers of hours in unpoliced situations where they are being exploited and getting an extraordinarily low pay. The commitment to the London Living Wage would at least give the possibility of publicising that, and hopefully help the Council, among others, to address those seriously disadvantageous situations for them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along. Can I ask the Cabinet Member, Councillor Noah Tucker, for Corporate Resources and Insourcing to respond?
Chair, I think I'm speaking for everybody here when I want to put on record our thanks and appreciation for the fantastic work that citizens here in Haringey, London Citizens and Citizens UK, together with the trade union movement, have been putting in on this very important issue, and thanks as well for the delegation today. As has been said, in Haringey, in terms of our own directly employed staff and indeed our agency staff, we already more than meet the criteria for accreditation, because our minimum hourly rate is £10.45, which is a little bit over the London living wage of £10.20 per hour. The problem is with our contractors. So in order to meet the threshold for becoming an accredited living wage employer, which we intend to do by November this year, we intend to deal with the issue with our contractors. And I want to say absolutely clearly, it is our intention to more than meet the conditions of being a living wage employer, and that's because we've signed the Ethical Care Charter with the unions. And that deals with the issue of care staff who are not directly covered by the accreditation under the London living wage. So just to give some idea of the steps that we're going to be taking towards this. We're going to be working with the Living Wage Foundation to agree a phased approach, and we're going to be identifying the contractors that are in scope to pay the London living wage to inform step one of the process. So we're going to be looking at where contracts are up for renewal, we're going to be looking at break clauses, and we're going to be looking at where we can put pressure on our existing contractors. We're going to be producing a cost analysis of paying the London living wage through our supply chain, and it is recognised that there may be a financial impact of this, particularly in the home care service. We're going to be liaising with neighbouring boroughs, and we're already in contact with colleagues in Islington looking at their experience in becoming an accredited employer. And we're going to be reviewing our procurement processes to make certain that it is absolutely clear to anybody who wants to provide a service to the people of Haringey via the borough that they need to be paying the London living wage as a base minimum. There is a last point, and this is a very important one. There is an opportunity as well for us to use this process to bring a number of these services back in-house. This is very, very important. The London living wage, it's absolutely important that people get a decent hourly rate. But we've also got to address the fact that people aren't getting decent pensions, people aren't getting security of employment, people aren't getting always the holiday pay that they should do. And for those reasons and many others, we want to be looking at whether we can bring the maximum number of services back in-house where we can fulfil the objectives in our manifesto and generally increase the standards of living and the quality of life of the workforce in the borough as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and that concludes the item, and thank you for coming along with the petition. Can I now move on to the next item, item 11? We have two reports before us this evening, which I've agreed to take as late business. I will pause for a few seconds as councillors return to the main screen on their computer to access this paper. First, can I call on the Chair of Standards Committee, Councillor Puku?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move the recommendation as on the cover of the report.
Can you stand? Because I couldn't see you.
I stood. I move the recommendation as stated on the cover of the report.
Is that recommendation on the cover report agreed? I now call on the Chair of Corporate Committee, Councillor Diakidis, who is going to briefly move his report.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is a standard report. It is about the way we handle our money. It is here because we've got a legal responsibility, each one of us as councillors, to be satisfied that we're handling our money properly. And the first thing to note is that we're talking about a lot of money, more than £1 billion a year, with thousands of transactions and massive cash flows every day. Sometimes we don't have enough money to pay the bills due the next morning at the end of the evening, so we borrow short term, and sometimes we have surplus which we lend sometimes overnight in order to bring a few more pennies in. And in the past there have been some concerns about how this side of things has been handled. For example, the Icelandic banks debacle. We have tightened the procedures up, spread the risk, but we still got a responsibility as individual councillors here to make sure that we are satisfied with doing our best. The second bit to note is that in addition to that, we've got long-term loans. In the report, you see there are about £365 billion from various sources, public and private sector, and at different rates taken at different times. Again, there have been concerns about how they have been managed in the past. For example, the Lobos debacle is an example of that. And again, it's our responsibility to make sure that we have improved our procedures here in order to meet our requirement. The last point I want to highlight, Madam Deputy Mayor, is that we are also embarking on a new program of investment, and people will be interested in, colleagues, on how much leeway we've got for borrowing extra money for capital investments. You see in the report we can borrow under two broad headings, General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. On the second one, there is a cap which is imposed by the government, and you will see that we've got a headroom of about £78 million on that one. On the general fund, there is no cap, but there is a legal responsibility to satisfy ourselves that we are prudent and we can afford to repay the loans and afford the charges. We have
Can
made
I ask you to wind up now, please?
We made a calculation on that, and we find out at the moment that we can have an extra 130 odd million on that one. In other words, about 200 million more on both of those. I won't go any further on that. Can I, in moving the recommendations, I urge our colleagues here to please read the reports, even after tonight's meeting. Please get in touch. Myself, we've got an excellent team of officers, and we can also set up training courses in order to make sure that we are all up to speed to play that important role. I move the recommendations.
Thank you for moving your recommendation and report so briefly. Is it agreed? Thank you. Oh, dear me. We have now reached item 12, which is the Haringey debate, which is on knife crime in Haringey and what are young people in the Haringey telling us to do. To remind members of this process, this debate will be introduced by a member of the Labour group who will have up to 5 minutes to introduce the item. Their guest speakers will have up to 10 minutes to introduce the topic and provide information to members. We will then start the debate of up to 45 minutes. I would like to invite Councillor Mark Blake to introduce the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank Councillor Rice for proposing this timely and informative debate? Can I also thank my predecessor, Councillor IEC, and the officers in the Community Safety Team for commissioning this powerful and instructive piece of research. Yvonne Lawson and her team from the Godwin Lawson Foundation for all the work they have put into this report and coming here tonight to share their findings. And, of course, the young people of our borough who participated in what was an extremely difficult, painful period with the loss of 3 young lives in Haringey in quick succession over a period of weeks earlier in the year. I will save my substantive comments for the end of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blake. I would like to welcome the guest speakers. We've got Yvonne Lawson, Jeff Austin, Caroline Large, and the Borough Commander, Helen Millichat. Yvonne, you have got 7 minutes.
While we're waiting for the presentation, I would like to express our gratitude and our sincere thanks to the Council for commissioning GLF, a very small organisation, to engage in the research. So the GLF knife crime research, we were commissioned by Haringey Council in January this year, and the aim... Oh, sorry. All right, okay. Brilliant, okay. So the objective of the research was to deliver a research with young people from Haringey who may be at risk of becoming either a victim or a perpetrator of knife crime. Also to engage with young people in groups methodically and to ensure that we record what young people said about anger and carrying knives, and to encourage young people to express how it feels like to live in N17 and N15 area of Tottenham today. And finally, to encourage young people and to support them to express what they think they will need as a way forward. So I'll hand over to my colleague.
Thank you. We were excited by this challenging piece of research, and we felt it was essential that we had researchers who were very close to the N17 and 15 community, but also researchers who could engage with the young people in terms of their ethnicity, in terms of their background, their age, and the fact that they are operating in life-threatening situations. But it was also essential that the research was robust, that research would stand up to outside scrutiny, and that also we needed to make the research qualitative to get their ideas and attitudes, but that the research process would be attractive to the young people. It was critical that we used LBS services and links to identify and recruit participants and the young people, the LBS services and the Godwin Lawson Foundation. Without those links, we couldn't have done the research. And as part of this whole process, we needed to ensure that safe places were found for the meetings so that the young people felt safe, felt protected, and that all the way through the process we guaranteed their anonymity.
Well, what did young people have to say about anger? People who misbehave make me angry. Lies make me angry. If I don't understand something, I get angry. Being called a liar affects me most. Inequality makes me angry. What do they say about their management of the anger? Well, I go quiet or lash out if provoked. If they do it again, which is annoying, I would lash out. Last time I punched the wall and broke a knuckle. If a stranger tries to hurt me, I'll fight back. I shout, I cry when I'm angry. Anger keeps me awake at night. How does it feel? Death. It has no impact on me. People die every day. It's not a big thing. Even young people, normal, isn't it? Sad, isn't it? Relationships with the police. This was a very stark piece of research that we were doing. Made me feel deeply sad. There's no time or place when we trust the police. If someone trusts the police, they're probably right. Better to be stabbed than tell the police, although not better to get stabbed. There's no situation where I call the police. They'd only be there to clean it up afterwards, really. Police only care when something happens. They do not tackle individuals with knives when we report them. What would make them feel supported?
So it was crucially important to find out from young people what they thought would make them feel really supported in our borough and help them to move forward. Young people commented on mentorship as quite an important aspect of something that would change them in a very tough environment. They also said that young people needed to see the world and they need inspiration. Young people thought having inspirational people around them would encourage them to move forward. Ensure that sport policing is seen as a way of protecting the young people. Young people also thought that it's important to support the parents. Some of them thought parents needed parenting skills. Rapid response to services of victims and perpetrators. I mean, as a mum who lost my son a few years ago through knife crime, it's almost expected in a community that I kind of reach out to all mothers that lose their children through knife crime. So it would be quite nice for the council to have a strategy in place for victims and perpetrators as a rapid response. Young people also thought after school support, stay on at school, engage in cultural, social and sporting activities will actually help them to move forward. Mentorship is critically important, particularly where families are not able to provide this at this level of support. And lots of the young people that thought they were from one-parent families, having the right mentors would actually help them to move forward. And we just have some short term.
Increase the number of adult mentors and young people mentors through existing programmes. Increase investment in after-school activities as one of the best safe places to improve social and cultural and employment activities. Work with the police on their engagement activities, encouraging police cadets, looking at transparency about hotspot policing, which is the language taking over from stop and search, and integration around family support. And the Youth Independent Advisory Group, the Borough Commander was thinking of setting up, GLF would be proud to support.
And in the medium term, apprenticeships are going to be critical. There is a project already set up. But if you think of the billions that's being invested in regeneration and building work in North London, then to target the energy and the utilities companies to take on more apprenticeships, more apprentices. And what needs to be done is that the current routes to apprenticeships, which are already there, but these need to be better targeted within schools and further education. And for the young people,
Can I ask you now to wind up, please?
For the young people, there needs to be better targeting and signposting.
Right. I'll do it. Okay. Basically, the issue of having a job and having a sensible economic life was very important to them. So the whole issue of apprenticeships, with the borough working in close partnerships with local firms, national bodies, and moving forward on that. And the whole idea of the cadet services, which had already been mentioned in this meeting, it seemed a good idea to have a target for the number of cadets this borough has, quadruple it in 4 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for this. And now we can start the debate. Oh, sorry. And now I call on Helen.
Firstly, thank you very much for the chance to be part of this session. The first thing I would like to emphasise is that the Met as a whole and your police locally welcome any insight into the views of young people on safety and risk. And specifically, I recognise the opportunity this report gives us to assess and improve our policing response to young people in Haringey. Some of the views expressed by the young people interviewed in this research are difficult but essential for me and for my officers to read, and I do encourage you to read every word of this report. You saw barely a snapshot of what's being said. I'm especially concerned about young people who would not call for our help should they need it. Any young person in danger should feel confident to call the police in an emergency, and this research suggests that this is not always the case. What I do know is that many, many hard-working and professional police officers will want, with me, to make sure that we can improve trust among young people in our borough. We want to talk about this report, and I've already asked the team who conducted the research to think about how we can meet some of the young people involved and listen to their views. One of the most powerful things in this report is that young people want to continue to talk, and I sincerely hope they are open to talking with us. Those spoken to in the report also recognise that more involvement between police and young people is needed, with education on both sides about their experiences of each other. Some of the roundtable work we did in 2017 produced great feedback about changing perceptions. However, this was a very small sample, and I think our challenge is to create space for a much wider group of police officers and young people to work together. We know that engagement with young people cannot be one size fits all, and we need to have a broad approach. The first and possibly the most important type of contact, I think, is from an early age. We recognise that prevention is at the heart of any effective response, as is recognising opportunities to divert young people away from crime. That is how trust is built. The police, I think, do have a role to play in early intervention, and we believe that positive contact from an early age is important. I disagree with those who say this is not part of our core role. We have started to work more closely with primary schools over the last 18 months, and next year, when the new policing model is rolled out into Haringey and Enfield, there are more officers committed to schools and youth liaison. As important as this work is, we don't underestimate the need to build trust among young people who do not have confidence in us now. Finding better ways for officers and young people to meet in the right environment and on the right terms is essential, recognising that it may be necessary for us to use others to make connections and bridges. I have been explicit, and as you've seen it appear in a short-term goal, which I'm glad to see, that I do want a tough and challenging young people's reference group to inform policing locally and to help us develop engagement plans that will work, rather than relying on what the police think might work. However, there are important policing challenges that I must mention, not least about how we make sure our finite resources are placed where we are likely to have the biggest impact. Another challenge is applying really long-term thinking to these issues. Improving trust is seen by the Foundation as a long-term recommendation, and I also agree that this is an issue that needs prolonged and careful attention, with change unlikely to be achieved overnight. The police have a complex job to do. Our responsibilities to target lawbreakers and tackle knife carrying mean that we are often in contact with young people who are both vulnerable, victims themselves, and committing offences. County Lines is an example of where the police may arrest a young person for drugs and weapons offences, yet that young person is also a child who is missing from home, who themselves may be offending as a result of exploitation. We do know that such situations can result in trafficking convictions for serious criminals, but the reality is, and more often, they fall into a much greyer area where it is a genuine challenge to strike the balance between enforcement and safeguarding. And this is the crux of it. The police cannot overcome the complex issues facing young people alone, but the police are sometimes the ones who are with that young person at a point of opportunity. It's therefore our responsibility to ensure we work with others, both to protect young people and to reduce reoffending, recognising that the outcomes we are looking for together are not working to any conflicting goals. We are in the process of co-producing a violence strategy with local partners. The Foundation report will be used to inform its content, as youth engagement has to be an intrinsic part of it for all of us. The strands of work within this plan will be common to all community safety partnerships across London, but will be interpreted locally. These themes are targeting lawbreakers, offering ways out of crime, keeping deadly weapons off our streets, protecting and educating young people, standing with communities, neighbourhoods and families against knife crime, and finally supporting victims of knife crime. The Foundation report you've heard about does provide insight for our partnership in relation to all of these areas of work, and has come, I think, at a time where we need to be innovative and thoughtful about what we do. It provides context for the work we are doing and is a very welcome reminder that the voices of young people should and can inform our plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now start the debate. Oh, sorry, have I missed out? Yeah, we can now start the debate. Members have up to 3 minutes to make their contributions, and we have a total time of 45 minutes. Can I first call on Councillor Adam Jones? And I call on Councillor Julia. Yes?
Okay, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm just going to quickly start with some short stats. According to the Council's own figures, Haringey, knife-related injuries increased by 90% in the last 6 months to March 2018. Now, that's the highest in London, so this is a very timely and welcome debate. However, the story is the same across London, and what has our response been to this? More punishment, more enforcement, more stop and search. The so-called war on gangs, despite the fact that most of knife crimes in London is no longer gang-related. Enforcement and tougher punishment is only one part of the solution. We also need to look at the root causes of these crimes. We need to ensure that victims' families are not forgotten. I note that the report recognises the impact that these crimes have on girls. I spoke to 2 young 17-year-old ladies a few weeks ago, and they basically said that they saw 2 of their friends stabbed to death, and no one gave them any support. There were no emotional support. There were no follow-ups to see how they are. These are the kind of help that these people need. These are the kind of help that these kids need. I have a 16-year-old brother whose friend was chased with a knife for their phone. There were no supports afterwards. You know, the debate is titled, "What are young people saying to us?" But it should be really, are we listening? Because before this report was commissioned, we already know. We know what they're saying. We know that 20% of the most prolific offenders in Haringey, for example, have common characteristics, so bereavement, having an older sibling involved in crime and domestic violence. We know a large proportion of offenders have special educational needs, mental health issues. We know victims and their families are not provided with enough support. We know the services from health to education to housing provided in this area where there are likely to be offenders are shocking and below standards. Whilst I recognise and appreciate the work that has gone into this report, it really is telling us what we already know. So, what are we doing? What are we waiting for? In the meantime, though, we continue to focus on punishment, rather than looking at the issues causing these crimes. We continue to focus on enforcement when young people have told us that heavy-handed policing create barriers, that they feel underprotected, over-policed, marginalised, and they are angry and fed up. The Lib Dems, at the last full council in March, we called for there to be a holistic approach to tackling the root causes of knife crime.
Sorry, Julie, can I ask you to wind up now, please?
Yeah. All
time.
I'm saying is I'm glad to see that there are programs coming into place, that are integrated gang units, but we need to do more. This report is a positive step, but we need to really just start listening and taking actual actions. Thank you.
I would like to congratulate you on your maiden speech. Well done. Well done. Can I now call on Mahir Demir?
Thank you. Just a brief statement. I'm somebody who's grown up on Broadwater Farm, and just seeing violence, whether it's with knives or anything else, was just part of daily life. I'm not proud to admit that when I was a teenager, I considered carrying a weapon for protection, not because I had disputes with anyone, but just because you could get jumped at any second, of the day. My parents later told me that they used to search my pockets and my brother's pockets and bags while we were sleeping for knives or drugs, just because of the fear that we could get involved in gangs. The lure of making easy money is quite strong if you, grow up on a council estate. All that being said, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I grew up with a supportive family, a brother who took me to basketball practices where I met people much older than me and who became my mentors, and guided me and my brother away from a path of violence, drug dealing or joining a gang for many who see it as a rite of passage. Instead of hanging around my estates, I went to community centres to play basketball, and if I acted up, I had those mentors who would then set me straight. Unfortunately for many in our borough, this option is not available to them. They leave primary school or secondary school with nothing to do. Social clubs have been shut down or activities available too expensive. They eventually end up on street corners as low-hanging fruits for drug dealers and older criminals who use them to distribute drugs or use them as foot soldiers. Many take this offer up because it's easy money. They belong to a group which is something they might not be a part of, and the consequences are just worth it for many. Reading some of the responses that the Godwin Lawson Foundation report, it's not surprising that young people think the way they do. They've been left behind, they've been victims of an austerity agenda enacted by the coalition. Whether it's cuts to the EMA, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's working for zero-hour contracts for slave labour wages, for some, the thought that they can make more money in a week than their parents can make in a month is, the lure is quite strong. At the council, we have a big task in front of us. While people like to ponder over questions of what does the youth want, for me it's quite simple. We need to crack down hard on those who prey on young people. This would involve increased community policing, invest in youth centres and services and generate apprenticeships where useful skills can be learned, reduce costs for kids to go to community centres instead of pricing them out of activities in the borough, invest in community mentors. Can I ask you to wind up now, please? Yep, nearly finished. Invest in community mentors who know how to approach and deal with kids and can do outreach work, work with the voluntary sector and just treat kids as you would like to be treated, with respect and on an equal footing. Thank you.
Can I also congratulate you on your first speech, also in the council chamber? And can I just remind both the whips on both sides to remind all your new councillors that the yellow light is a warning to, to wind up, and the red light is to finish. I don't like to interrupt people when they're in full flow. So I'm going to call on Councillor Ruth Gordon, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite sad, really, that I'm having to make my maiden speech on a subject that is so tragic and that has arisen out of the result of so many deaths of young people in my own ward, which covers N17. We've seen, just on the borders of that ward, we saw the death of Tanisha Melbourne, who was just 17, cycling to see her mates, and was shot and lost her life. We saw the death of a youth worker who was just 22, Kobe Nelson, on the edge of Hartington Park in my ward. And of course we saw recently the death, a fatal stabbing of somebody who lived in my ward, but the event took place in Islington. So we've got some tragic events, and those tragic events have a ripple effect on all sorts of, on all of your residents, whether that means it's whether that is that the parents of children who don't want their own children to go outside and play in the park because they're worried, or whether it's about, like the resident that wrote to me a few weeks ago, who'd witnessed a fatal stabbing and had been off work ever since. So we've sort of met in on the back of these tragic circumstances, and I hope this will be the beginning of some action that we will take as councillors on the back of this report. If I counter that with an activity I did, which probably most of you, especially the experienced councillors, do this on a regular basis. You go into a school, you're presenting your high-vis jackets to a bunch of kids, and it's brilliant and uplifting. I had spent a bit of time getting on a tour of Holy Trinity School on Friday morning. The kids were so enthusiastic about their school, explaining to me about the wind turbine that can fire up your laptop and all of this. Are really excited about their school life. And, you know, you've got there in just 2 instances of the death of a young person and the absolute despair of parents and relatives, and the hope that that other parents will have in their children growing up in our borough. And I think really that I welcome absolutely the report that's come out. I think it's a very thorough report. I think that it really highlights 2 aspects. One is how we can disrupt some of the activity that is going on, and the other aspect is how we can prevent it. I note the items from Glasgow and the successful campaign that's gone on there, which I think is really worth learning those lessons.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, thank you,
because
Chair.
that's what the red light is for.
And I really hope now that as a council and new administration, we'll be putting the resources into the youth in our area to make sure that we cut down on this dreadful crime.
I can see we're going to have a lot of maiden speeches tonight. Can I now call on Tammy Palmer?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So I'm sure we've all seen and been horrified by the level of gun and knife crime in the city this year. By the end of April, more than 52 people had been murdered in London, and 18 of those were young people under the age of 21. 14 stabbed to death and 4 shot. And we've seen the news reports with the victims' photos, the grainy social media shots, the family or school pictures, and in many of them, those young people are smiling. Their eyes are bright with hope for their future, and their families and friends all tell us what they'd hoped they might achieve and how full of life they were. And with each death, we wonder how this can possibly happen on our streets, and we stop and we pay our respects to the shrine of flowers, photos, poems and candles that are laid to remember them. And when the flowers dry out and crumble and the candles burn away and the shrine gets cleared, inevitably life has to continue. And yet we know that violent crime in young people isn't new. Adults who've grown up in some areas of London will tell you that they've watched friend after friend die or be injured. The fear of walking through a postcode that wasn't their own. the pressure to join a gang to keep safe, and that you just didn't trust the police or anyone in authority. And very little has changed. And although this report is welcome, we talk nationally and locally year after year about youth crime, and politicians commission reports and talk of long-term strategies. But by the time the ink is dry, another young life has been lost or changed forever. We know that young people in our borough are afraid to walk through the different postcodes to meet their friends. We know that they're joining gangs for protection and that they carry knives because they're afraid. And this was very much the sentiment shared by the hundreds of young people that I met on Saturday. Look, there isn't a magic wand that we can wave to stop it, and we can only solve it if we're prepared to be brave and work together, and we put our politics to one side.
Can I also ask you to wind up, please?
There's a really helpful childline resource that's aimed at young people, and one line stands out, and that is, you should not be scared. Now, I've got a 6-year-old growing up in N17, and I've had to walk him through far too many shrines, and I am running out of excuses. Essentially, what I'm saying to you today is that I want a future for my kid that is not governed by the fear of dying young.
I'm sorry to be, keeping on about the lights, but I've got 9 people who wish to speak. And if you eat into their time, then somebody at the bottom is going to be knocked off and won't be able to speak. And I know that you want everybody to speak. Thank you very much for your beautiful maiden speech. I appreciate that. And now can I ask Councillor Rice, who I know will stick to the lights.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to make my maiden speech. Madam Deputy Mayor, it should be. On Friday the 29th of July, I attended the funeral of Marcel Campbell at St Mary's Church, Tottenham, which is in my ward. Marcel lived in Tottenham Hill, together with his partner and 2 infant children. His funeral followed his murder in Islington when he was knifed to death by assailants, thus depriving his young family of a father. His killing was one of several which occurred in North London this spring, and in Tottenham Hill in particular. You've already heard from my fellow councillor, Councillor Ruth Gordon, talk about the other 2 murders in our ward. The question we are faced with is this: how do we help our young people away from this vicious way of life and a more acceptable way of doing things? We've had the guidance from this report, which is welcome, and I dare say the Council will act on the best features of it in the coming months. I note the concern that comes to me from this report is the stipulation that one respondent says that he would rather be stabbed to death than to work with the police. And I think the police have got an awful lot to do in terms of sorting it out. We mustn't have people, young people growing up, forming our society, who are absolutely scared, who've got no confidence in the police, and when somebody says, I'd rather be dead than talk to the police got a lot to answer for. And I would like to ask the Chief Superintendent this question, and she gets an opportunity to reply at the end of these discussions. What organisation, what structures have you got in place to communicate with our community, with young and all communities? If people are concerned about things, the way things are, how do they approach you? How do they get access to the police and try and resolve the issues? This is a dreadful period of my time staying in Haringey over the number of years. People being hacked to death as if it didn't matter. And quite frankly, I'm deeply saddened by it all. And these vicious killings bring to me the words of the songster. By the rivers of Babylon, I sat down and cried.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. Can I now call on Councillor Josh Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This will just be a brief contribution from myself. I welcome the opportunity to be able to contribute to such an important and timely debate. I hope we can all agree that centring young people at the heart of these discussions is vital to understanding how we can help address their needs and ensure the sufficient provision of services and opportunities to help give them the best start in life and deter them away from knife crime. I directly want to speak to the issue around the provision of youth services. As someone who works in the youth sector, I know how important these interventions are and the positive differences that they can make. It's disappointing that many local authorities across the country have consistently failed to prioritise youth services and the role they play in our communities. Be they open access or specifically targeted interventions, youth services provide opportunities for young people outside the classroom that is both secure and important for new life skills to be learnt. Youth workers as well will often be a figure of trust for many young people, a crucial lifeline to those who feel that society is slowly turning its back on them. Youth services may not be the only answer. Issues, of course, the root issues around poverty and as well as institutional distrust of our police have certainly not aided the response to rising knife crime particularly well. But what youth services do provide is a pathway to a better life for so many. So I want us to redouble our efforts to champion youth services and make sure that we extend these opportunities to as many young people as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your maiden speech, and I'm glad it was brief. Thank you. Can I now call on Councillor Lucia Danives?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. Young men in our borough deserve to feel safe, and young women in our borough deserve to feel safe too. And it's young women I want to talk about. Right now in our borough, young women are being raped. They're being raped as part of an initiation process for young men in gangs. And they won't report it because they're afraid for their lives, for their families, and for their friends. And imagine being a worker for, say, an organisation like Solace Women's Aid that might see one of these young women and might seek to support them. And imagine telling them in our borough that they don't meet the threshold for mental health services. They don't meet the threshold for CAMS. They can't get support if they want it. And imagine being that worker still who hears a conversation in a meeting about a 12-year-old girl who is described as having sex with men. But we all know that that's not possible because she cannot consent. But she is subject to our use of language, the language we use to talk about these things, and it becomes a blaming of the victim. I make no apology for being graphic in the things I'm talking about, because these things are the realities of the young women who live in our borough. And to use the words of another young woman who I heard recently speak at an event, who spoke very competently on a lot of issues, a Haringey young woman, she said, "We need to get woke." Now, I'm a bit too old to really get what that means, but I think what she means is that we need to wake up to reality and connect with the reality of our young people in the borough. Connect with it and be there in it with them. So what do we need in our borough for these young women, for our young people? We need services that respond to their needs. We need language, and we all in this room need to use language that fits their reality. We need local intervention that is there for them every day, day in, day out, to build their trust and their confidence and their partnership. They need to know that we are here for them. And I look forward to our new administration
making that clear to our young people so that we can all get a little bit more woke.
Thank you very much for another excellent maiden speech. Well done. Can I now call on Councillor Hare?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, after the football, we are getting back to the reality that we have some really difficult issues in this borough. The GLF report, I think, is a really good initiative, and there are some really interesting and valuable insights in it. Last week, the Islington Gazette put an enormous amount of its coverage onto the issue of knife crime in Islington. It was working with the Ben Kinsella Trust and represented 10 years, or commemorated 10 years since he was stabbed and died. And they've had some interesting initiatives too, including an exhibition attended by 11,500 school children. But they've got a couple of interesting quotes I'll give you in a moment. Diversion is mentioned by the speakers from the GLF, and that's not just diversion, but it's also an opportunity to intervene in young people's lives and give them an opportunity to talk to other people, the mentorship which the GLF talked about. I've been very pleased to be a member of the management committee. I think that probably makes me a trustee of the Muswell Hill Community Centre, as has Mark Blake. He's been a really useful member of that same committee over the last year or so. And Julia, here, my colleague, I think is considering whether she likes this enough to join. She is joining, she says. And it leads really on to the issue of what councils can do. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from Brooke Kinsella, who was someone, it was Ben's sister, and she was an actor in EastEnders, so she got more coverage than perhaps others would. But we shouldn't have to wait for a celebrity to lose a brother. Brooke was asked, what can people in power do to stop knife crime? And her answer was that one of the biggest problems is long-term planning and investment. Across all the boroughs, people try and give a quick fix, an overnight solution, and it doesn't work. For me, it's calling on councils and government to invest long-term. There's no point in giving projects a little bit of money to run something for a year and then it's gone before it can make a difference. It needs long-term thinking. And we need places for young people to go to where they feel safe and not just on the streets. There are so many kids who don't know what to do and have nowhere to go. And we've heard that too from others. And there's one further point I would like to make, which is about futures and young people knowing that they've got a future in this borough. And that means role models, and it also means jobs at the end of the street. And this is why I'm so concerned that we've agreed the loss, as a council, the loss of the light industrial site at 500 White Hart Lane, which was a really big one. That's gone, that will be built on, is being built on. But this council is now putting at risk the High Road West light industrial spaces and businesses. And they are really important. It is really important that we have those role models and jobs at the end of our street, not just remotely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob. Can I now call on Councillor Sarah Williams?
Thank you, Chair. So I have 3 teenage children who are being brought up by me in N17 at the moment. Both of my sons have suffered muggings in the park, one an aggravated assault. These problems are real, and I welcome the report. As socialists, we all know that inequality drives crime, and inequality is the root problem here. But I didn't know everything that was in that report before I read it, and I have read it from beginning to end. And a lot of things struck me about the report, not least how our young people feel in school in Haringey. And I'm a governor at the secondary school in Tottenham, And unfortunately, you know, we suffer the tragedy of losing 2 of our students to knife crime out of school. One of the boys was actually killed by his best friend. This is what we are dealing with in Tottenham. But in the report, the part that struck me was about that young people feel there's a racial bias in Haringey schools, and that young people don't feel that teachers understand quite how afraid they are and quite how frightened they are. And I think this will come as a shock to head teachers and to governors of all Haringey schools. And I welcome the report, and I look forward to measures that Councillor Blake and colleagues are going to put in place to try and address these really worrying concerns of young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And another excellent maiden speech. Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Hakata? Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I've spoken to quite a few people where I live about this, and there was one young woman, 23 years old, who I think articulated it best when she said that what these boys need is jobs, and I think, you know, that was pretty much it. And she said they don't just need, you know, they basically need something that's going to incentivise them away from Mr. Big, who's telling them that they can become the glamour of selling drugs, and that they basically, what they need is economic opportunity. And they're excluded economically, they're excluded socially, and they need prospects. And you get those prospects with good jobs and careers. Haringey Council has a net budget of 250 million, which is about 41 million more than Spurs. It's a huge organisation, it's a huge employer, it's a huge spender in procurement. And I would like to know how much of that 250 million is being spent on suppliers within Haringey, and how we can use the supply chain within Haringey to create jobs, because the council itself is a market shaper, and we can hope that central government is going to do it for us, but they're not, we know that. And we need to innovate, and we need to lead on how to actually create the jobs that are needed in this borough. People, you know, there was talk about mentoring and these kind of things, but you can't. Basically, it's like it's a band-aid. The policing, the youth centres, all of this, they're obviously extremely important, but without jobs to go to and without jobs to look forward to and good paying jobs, we can't have it. And what we can do in Haringey is basically we can back co-ops, we can back social enterprises. These are businesses that, you know, are putting back into the community. They spend their profits back in the community rather than onto their shareholders, and they look to employ people who are hard to reach. And with the 250 million we've got to spend in Haringey, we need to look at where that money is going, and it'll probably surprise most people that most of that money is not going to Haringey. So we need to look at where we're spending into that supply chain and create the jobs to create a future for our young people.
Thank you very much. Another excellent maiden speech. Can I now call on Councillor Stone?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm going to keep my comments brief because I think my colleagues have covered a lot of the things that I wanted to say very well. So I do really welcome the report, and I welcome the focus on listening to young people. It may be true that we know what some of the problems are, but it remains the case that we need to continue listening to young people, and we should enshrine that in our approach, and that will make our response better. So it's a good start for the new administration to be talking in this way about the issue, and hopefully, as Councillor Neves said, trying to connect with the reality that young people face. And I hope and understand that's very much the approach that Councillor Blake will be taking. I also wanted to just quickly say how much I appreciated Councillor Demir's contribution, and to sort of say more on that, which is that there is an evidential base, that statistics that show that among the causes that lead to knife carrying, the most significant is fear of crime itself. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, in other words, and the solution has to be about making younger people feel safe. The categories of victim and perpetrator here overlap so much as to be meaningless, in effect, one you could argue. The final thing that I wanted to say, and this relates in part to what Councillor Williams was talking about in relation to our schools, and it's an amazing, I work for the National Education Union, and clearly it's an amazing achievement that our schools are now 100% either good or outstanding. But we do also have to think about what education and our care for young people is and means, and it has to go beyond those categories and those understandings about what success is, and very much take into account, in my view, what Councillor Williams was saying. And in that, there is a need, and it is inescapable, there is a need for a huge amount more resources, both for our schools and for the services that support them. And working for the National Education Union, I've seen that schools are struggling, that youth services are crumbling, and we should also be, as a council, a campaigning council that very much puts that at the centre of our mission, which is to call for more resources to enable us to be effective in what we do in supporting and protecting our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Another excellent maiden speech. Can I now call on Councillor Berryman to speak? And you'll be pleased to know we managed to actually get in 12 people to speak, which I think is excellent. And thank you for being so good on the lights. So, Councillor Berryman.
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. I'll keep it brief as well, and ironically follow what Councillor Stone has said. He's kind of taken my points, which is around schools. I worked 2 years recently in a primary school in Haringey. It was a great experience, and one of the things watching the amazing teachers and senior leadership staff dealing with children when there were issues was they would say to the children, it's your choice. It's your choice to walk out of this lesson, or it's your choice to misbehave during this activity. And the great thing is, fortunately, budgets in schools have up until recently been more protected than council budgets, and schools can still provide good choices for children and young people to not make the wrong decisions. But obviously at council level we have faced austerity and we have seen choices taken away. In my ward in Bounds Green, where I've recently become a councillor, there's a grandmother of a knife victim who was killed in late March in Plumstead, barely mentioned more than a line in the newspapers the day after, and that's it. And the first thing she said to me was that they took away his education support allowance, so that was the choice that was taken away to go to college, in her view. So I think we just have to remember, when we make choices as political people, whether it be in manifestos and things like that, for example, when you freeze council tax or something like that, you are taking away another choice elsewhere to provide a service. And lastly, I just will say we have tried this summer, I'm not trying to do PR, but this is the Haringey Summer Youth Programme, by putting a few more of the scarce resources into it to hopefully give teenagers, especially in the borough, a chance to make another choice than the wrong one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berryman. Now I call on the Cabinet Member for Communities, Safety and Engagement to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for all the excellent contributions and brilliant maiden speeches. This report focuses on young people in Tottenham, but the issues clearly impact across the borough in Wood Green, Stroud Green, Hornsey and the entirety of the borough. The awful rise in murders that has impacted on our borough and city has of course led to a spiral of emotions, anger, despair, disbelief. At these moments, society rightly looks to its political leaders for reassurance and hope. It's easy for politicians to make grandstanding statements of unity and upholding law and order, but these can risk sounding like hollow platitudes if we fail to listen to those who are most affected by these terrible incidents and address the conditions that make them possible. Because for me, with quite a bit of experience in this field, therein lies the potential for solutions. As Bob Marley said, who feels it knows it. This report lays bare some very hard truths and challenges for politicians like me, and this administration is determined that in our response we will not shirk those challenges. We will not just listen to young people and slink away conveniently forgetting what they have consistently said, but we will be guided by what they say and ensure their views are at the centre of what we do. A consistent message from the report is that trust is critical from young people, and trust from young people in our institutions is a commodity that we desperately need to build. We will be having further discussions with Yvonne and her colleagues about how best we can ensure that sustained engagement and involvement with relevant young people is at the heart of our emerging approach in the borough. We also want to involve Yvonne in dialogues we will be having with Sadiq Khan and his team. Madam Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, the report chimes with many of the points in our administration's manifesto. We are committed to making an investment in our youth services, and will detail this in the autumn. Doing all in our power to create employment opportunities for local young people and ensure those opportunities reach the most marginalised and impoverished in our borough. Build a trusting relationship with our local voluntary sector. My good colleague Councillor Brabazon, through leading the Fairness Commission, will reset the Council's priorities, placing fairness and addressing inequality at the centre of everything we do. And we know that this issue of violence is having a huge impact across the borough. But within the few weeks new administration has been in charge, we have also moved a few things. We've submitted a council bid and supported a number of local voluntary sector bids to the Mayor of London for innovative projects to support a community response, and we'll have the results of those in September. We are developing our borough plan, and reducing the criminalisation of children will be a key objective in that plan. We are determined that we must do more to divert young people away from the youth justice system, working with our police, schools and health colleagues to address this, and in particular, as highlighted in the 2016 scrutiny review on ethnic disproportionality in our youth offending service, led by my good colleague Councillor Hearn, that we address the acute problem in this area experienced by black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, particularly black boys. Further funds in excess of £90,000, as highlighted by my colleague Councillor Berryman, and with support from Councillor Brabazon, have been identified to widen our summer programme offer to young people across the borough. And further work will continue with partners such as Fusion about how we can make our sports centres more accessible and affordable for young people. I was delighted the report highlighted the value of mediation services, with examples given from the USA and detailing some of the work in Glasgow that has been effective. I'm personally determined to establish something along these lines in Haringey, and will be working with partners around this, including the Mayor of London. I will lead a public consultation on our draft Serious Violence and Developing Youth Services plan in the autumn. Madam Deputy Mayor, there are no quick solutions to this crisis, but this administration is determined to place what I believe can be an effective response in partnership with key local public bodies, such as schools, the police, health services, probation services, local civil society, faith groups, the wider community, and most importantly with young people at its heart. Much of the debate has focused on police numbers and the devastating impact of austerity on our police service. I'm proud that Haringey is committed to supporting the police, and we co-fund 6 community-based Haringey officers at a time when I know other boroughs are seriously considering withdrawing that support. But we must understand that we cannot police our way out of this crisis. Austerity has devastated many of the services that our young people are demanding and made it harder for us to respond. In Haringey, as across the country, we have seen more young people coming into the care system as the absurdity of austerity cuts the funding for the very preventative services that would have kept them out of care, and increasing our costs as a local authority. This, as in so many of the financial challenges we face in local government, driven by austerity, is stupid economics.
Can I ask you
if we fail to listen to what our young people are saying, I believe the consequences will be dire. But this administration is determined to avert that outcome, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in ensuring that we work together to address the challenges laid bare in this report and make our young people feel safer, giving them all an environment within Haringey where they can thrive, regardless of where they live, financial circumstances, social class, gender, faith or race. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. I would like to thank everyone for their participation in the debate, and in particular our guests. Could all members join me in a round of applause as they leave the chamber? We now go on to item 13. Can I ask Councillor Williams to put her question to the Cabinet Member for Housing and Estate Renewal?
Is that me? Oh, God.
Mike.
Mike. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wondered a question to Councillor Ibrahim. Would the Cabinet Member please like to explain what the Council is doing to ensure the safety of residents in Tangmere and Northolt? I ask as Ward Councillor for West Green.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. So just a brief kind of recap on some of the issues that were covered at the Cabinet meeting. So the safety of the residents is paramount in the work that we're currently undertaking on Broadwater Farm. Since we received the results of the tests, which confirmed that both Tangmere and Northolt had failed the structural tests, we have reduced the risk by putting into place a number of mitigations. So Tangmere, which has piped gas, so the gas cookers have been removed there and they've been replaced with electric cookers, and they've also had gas interrupter valves put in to make sure that if there is a gas leak, that will automatically switch off the gas if anything is detected. In both Tangmere and Northolt, Homes for Haringey has put in place a 24-hour concierge service, and there's also a running programme of regular home visits to reduce the risks that associated with tenants bringing in bottled gas, which may come into the building, which both those buildings are also at risk of. Since the health and safety issues came to light, Homes for Haringey have undertaken an intensive programme of resident engagement, and I know you and the other ward councillors have participated in that.
I invite you to ask a supplementary question, Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams, do you want to ask a supplementary question? All right. Can I ask if the Liberal Democrat wants to ask a supplementary? Yes. Okay.
Oh, no, sorry.
It's now your chance, I think. Question number 2 from Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference the Cabinet meeting on the 26th of June 2018, when it was stated that there are 85 vacant council properties, which is almost enough for the 89 families in Tangmere, but it doesn't appear to include provision for non-council tenants of Tangmere and all of the residents in Northolt. So what's the plan for rehousing those residents, either temporarily or longer term, while the blocks are strengthened or rebuilt?
So, yeah, thank you for that question. So, obviously, you'll be aware that the council's got specific duties to rehouse the council tenants in the block, but also to, obviously, that there'll be an arrangement for leaseholders as well. For private tenants, if their own landlord doesn't assist them, Homes for Haringey will support in developing a plan with them to prevent them becoming homeless. Obviously, you know, that they'll be able to access schemes where Homes for Haringey provide incentives for private landlords to assist them. However, just let's be clear that if somebody finds themselves homeless at the end of the period where Cadent are going to switch off the gas supply, if they would normally be part of the council's priority need kind of process, and then they would obviously be assisted by the council as as well. So that would be people who would normally fit into priority needs anyway. If they wouldn't, then Homes for Haringey would assist them, ensuring that they're going to be able to secure accommodation before that date.
Councillor Barnes, do you want a supplementary?
Yes, please. It kind of follows up from this. It's about a longer-term plan for the whole of Broadwater Farm. So what's happening with the rest of the estate, whether it's a strengthening or rebuilding of the two most at-risk properties, what happens to everything else on Broadwater Farm and the residents and tenants there?
So I presume that you mean in terms of the other blocks and the longer-term plan for the blocks that are not being decanted for the present. So some of those need structural work done to them as well, but that doesn't involve a wholesale decant of the blocks. So there may be some periods of time where parts of those blocks need to have some specific work done for them, but because obviously they're going to be getting a district heating system because they've not failed the multiple tests, then the provision there is going to be of a much lower scale, and obviously at some point we're going to be able to kind of make a decision about whether there is a longer term refurb of those blocks. But currently the two blocks that are going to be decanted, whether it's the decision is to strengthen or to rebuild, those two blocks affected are Northolt and Hangmere. That doesn't mean that the wider engagement and consultation process won't include the residents of the other blocks as well.
Councillor Bull, is there anybody on your side that wants a supplementary? Who's that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like the Cabinet member to expand a bit further on the Council's offer to other tenants on the Broadwater Farm estate to ensure that in the long term that they get the best deal possible out of the work being done in the area. I mean, something that you have already alluded to, but if you could give some more detail. Thank you.
I presume again you mean the residents who are in the other blocks that are not immediately affected. So obviously they have work that's going to be done to their blocks as well, which is the district heating system. Again, like I said to Councillor Barnes, that there is some restructuring work that needs to be done there as well. But obviously they need to, if there is going to be a decision subsequently to rebuild those two blocks, then they need to be part of that discussion as well. And obviously that needs to be part of a broader consultation. But we just need to be clear that that decision on what we are going to do with those two blocks is not going to happen until probably now November, simply because the consultation process we envisage is going to be starting at the beginning of September to make sure that it's not during the summer holidays, and everybody, as many people as possible, will be participating. But again, that means that that some of that resident engagement needs to be taking place with those residents as well, because obviously Homes for Haringey is having conversations with them about safety as well, reassuring them, because they've had their gas cookers removed as well, and they've had the safety valves.
Thank you. Councillor Carlin?
I have a question for Councillor Brabazon about the Fairness Commission. How will the Fairness Commission align with the policy mechanisms of the Council?
Well, thank you very much for asking a question about the Fairness Commission, giving me an opportunity to have an advert. I think the question is sort of a technical question regarding the timescales and timetables regarding how the Commission is going to run and the type of things that it will come up with. So I guess there are two ways to answer this. One is a technical and one is aspirational. Regarding the technical response, we aim to run this for approximately 12 months, and our ambition is to publish our final report in the summer of 2019. We hope to start taking evidence in September 2018, having spent the summer ironing out some of the what you might call the technicalities and ensuring that we've got everybody in line and that everybody's clear on terms of reference and so on. Once that process is complete with the final report, there will be recommendations, and that will be up for the Council to, to respond to those recommendations and then apply those into our strategy and how we deliver our services. Another way of saying that, less technically, is that the Fairness Commission, we hope, and our aspiration is that it will provide a scaffolding for policy interventions which seek, as Councillor Blake said, to mitigate the worst impacts of inequality which have been brought about in this borough for the last 8 years by the appalling and wicked policies of this government. We can't stop poverty, we can't stop inequality. What we can do is use our levers and our resources to try and mitigate the worst impact and close the gap, which is so wide in this borough. So I hope that answers the question.
Councillor Carlin, do you want a second supplementary?
Yes, please. And I understand that the Fairness Commission will have commissioners appointed on various areas. And I would like to know, how will you ensure that the commissioners are representative of our diverse borough?
That's a very good question, and we've worked very hard in trying to identify commissioners who do exactly that. We are in the process of just finalising commissioners and some others we have to approach. You will realise in Haringey nothing can be anything if not diverse. And so as we have sought to appoint commissioners, most of whom, well nearly all who live in the borough, that has been one of the criteria, is to ensure that it is representative and looks very much like the people who live here. We're not quite complete, but we hope the end of this week at least to announce the commissioners who are in place. There is a bit more to do, but I can assure you one of the criteria has been to be representative. Thank you.
Would you like to ask one? Yep. Okay. Stand up.
Councillor, can you just confirm how you're going to maintain impartiality for the Fairness Commission, particularly if there are Cabinet members sitting on it or chairing it?
I've been very clear, and in fact have met with your leader, to say that this is cross-party, not very interested in Yaboo politics, and I think in fact tonight has shown how we can work respectfully together. The aim of this is a most serious endeavour, and we're not interested in being partial. We are interested in hearing evidence. When you hear evidence, you then respond to the evidence you hear. And since we are seeking evidence from local residents of their own experiences, very similar, in fact, to what we've just heard about the Godwin Lawson Foundation report, you base your findings on the evidence that you hear, whether it's from local residents with their stories, of which I am sure there are going to be many, or whether it is experts, partner agencies, voluntary groups, politicians, or wherever people come from. What we do want to do is to ensure that the Commission listens to what people say and reflects in order to shape recommendations. I hope that will reassure you.
Thank you. Can I ask question number 4 from Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. Councillor Brabazon, sorry, no rest for you this evening. It's another question for you, I'm afraid. Given recent notable cases of customer dissatisfaction with Fusion's running of leisure facilities, including poor customer service, dirty and broken equipment and facilities, inefficient communication and engagement, and an apparent lack of interest in feedback, what additional steps will the Council be taking to ensure that paying customers receive acceptable quality of service? Thank you.
Again, it's a very timely and important question. I know that you have met with officers from the Leisure Service, and I have to make a confession that I haven't yet had the meeting with officers, that's this week for me, on the Fusion contract. However, I'm perfectly aware that there is a lot of criticism of that contract, and clearly it is our job to ensure that the problems are rectified. I'm told that in the cases that you brought, these have been resolved. It is our job to monitor that contract. It is our job to ensure that Fusion operate to a high standard. And I attend, and with my colleagues who are also involved in this process, to make sure that that happens. I think feedback from users is critical. If Fusion are not taking full account of that, then that is an issue which I personally will be raising with them to ensure that they do so.
Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. And yes, I'm actually really satisfied with the progress that's being made at Park Road. But Councillor Brabazon, could I please put in a plea for you to perhaps make an unscheduled visit to Tottenham Green Leisure Centre, where I suspect there might be some ongoing challenges. Thank you.
I confess that I probably should go there and actually do some scheduled visits. However, I will take you up on that offer. I am going to the library. Lots of questions I have for Fusion about the library while I'm there as well.
Does anybody on this side want to ask a question? Councillor Bevan.
Zena, I'm sure you're not aware that Fusion at Tottenham Green this morning, the swimming pool, opened 2 hours late. So when you go, there's another issue there that you can raise.
Had I been going swimming, I might have noticed that the pool wasn't open. I take the point that is completely unacceptable. As it was at recently, the swimming lessons weren't operational either. So I think we're aware of those issues, and I look forward to that meeting with Fusion.
Can I now call on Councillor Amin, please?
Can I please ask the Cabinet Member for Community Safety and Engagement if they could say a little bit more about their voluntary sector engagement strategy to combat youth violence in Haringey?
Thank you, Councillor Amin. Clearly, in terms of how we move forward and the debate that we've just had, the voluntary sector is a critical partner. We're very much looking at a community response in terms of the issues that have been highlighted in the debate. And I think central to that, I know this isn't part of your question, but we obviously had, and there was a written question, we obviously had the whole initiative around the youth zone. I took a paper to Labour Group a few weeks ago recommending that we do not proceed with that particular proposal. I'm delighted that my colleagues in Labour Group fully endorsed the paper that I presented to them. And one of the key factors there is that that proposal would have fractured our relationships with the local voluntary sector at an absolutely crucial time where we need to be building them. We have a number of projects, I think, that are in quite an early stage. One of which I know that we're working with the MAC UK project in Tottenham with our early help on a pilot programme around knife crime and violence aimed at Year 6 pupils with 6 of our primary schools. I wanted to detail, in response to the issues that were raised by Councillor Nevis in her remarks, an excellent speech in the debate around young women. This is quite crucially a serious aspect in terms of this challenge. I'm glad she mentioned Solace Women and the work that they're doing. We have a crucial, I think, challenge. I was in a discussion with a local GP talking about a particular school, an alarming, she was conveying to me an alarming rise in referrals from young women from this particular school with mental health issues potentially she felt around child sexual exploitation. We've got a huge job to do, I think, under that agenda in terms of what's going on with young girls. We need to be doing more with parents. We certainly need to be doing a lot more in terms of addressing the attitudes of young boys. We need to be doing more in terms of raising the self-esteem of young girls. So I think that's going to be a crucial aspect in terms of how we move forward, and voluntary sector partners are going to be critical within that. I wanted to mention as well within that obviously I want to pick up some of those points with Councillor Weston, and it might be good if we get Councillor Daz Nevis in some of those discussions as well. Just one final point in terms of my early observations. I feel that in Tottenham we have a stronger infrastructure in terms of our services and the voluntary sector with regards to youth services. So certainly in terms of how we move forward, looking at what's going on in Wood Green and other parts of the borough, but particularly in terms of Wood Green, is going to be a crucial aspect in terms of that process, because we need to build that infrastructure up there. But we're moving that forward. As I said, we'll be going out to public consultation in the autumn. We need to kind of bring the whole community with us.
Can I please ask, when you're responding, to be absolutely sure that you're talking too long? Because we need the debate to get the debate. Councillor Amin, can you supplementary?
Very short supplementary question. I just wondered what the Cabinet member has already done since he's come into post to reduce the possibility of youth violence over the summer period when violence is more likely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did mention in my speech, and obviously Councillor Berriman mentioned, in the short time the new administration has been has been at the helm, that one of the key issues we raised very early on was around the summer programme. We managed to allocate, I think, an additional £90,000 to broaden that programme, particularly in terms of access to sporting facilities. We're funding a programme with the Burnley Grant Arts Centre. I'm delighted that we're funding the Burnley Grant Arts Centre, who for a number of years the council hasn't been funded, and we need to develop our relationship there with them, obviously not to the detriment of other arts organisations in the borough, but it always felt for me, sitting on the back benches in the previous administration, quite incredulous that we weren't working with the Burnley Grants Arts Centre. So I'm delighted we've been able to do that. Obviously we've come in very short notice trying to make these changes. There are a number of markers, I think, for moving forward. One of the crucial ones, I think, is a far greater corporate response in terms of access to facilities for young people and subsidised access to facilities. Obviously, Fusion, my colleague Councillor Brabazon, we'll be having discussions with them. But I think we want to look to the wider services across the council. Schools, obviously, are kind of key players, the voluntary sector. And dare I say, Alexandra Palace, I'd love to see today when we have subsidised access to the ice rink for young people in Tottenham and Wood Green. Thank you.
Is there a supplementary? No? Okay. Can I move on then to Councillor Morris, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. My question is for Councillor Ibrahim. Could you please provide me with a figure on how much the Council has spent on the HDB to date and the projected costs of withdrawing from the competitive dialogue procedure, including any liabilities that will need to be honoured? Thank you.
Sorry, I believe that's to Councillor Ejiofor, and just for clarification, my surname is Ibrahim.
Many apologies.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morris. This information is set out in the report that's going to Cabinet tomorrow in much greater detail than I'm going to give you this evening. The council costs to date for setting up the HDB are about £2.5 million, and this includes the costs of responding to the judicial review. However, it does exclude the cost of staff time. The HDB project itself, the agreements were never actually signed, and so there is no contract with Lend-Lease. However, as set out in the Cabinet report, there was an agreement between the Cabinet and Lend-Lease that in the event of the HDB not being established, that the two organisations would share the costs incurred by Lend-Lease on behalf of the HDB ahead of its creation. The Council intends to honour that commitment, and that would entail reimbursing Lend-Lease about £520,000. About £520,000. I apologise. £500,000.
Have you got supplementary, Councillor Morris?
I do. Thank you very much. With the demise of the HDV and the Council's previous track record of delivering homes, how confident are you that the Council can meet the Mayor of London's target of building 1,958 homes a year? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I think that as an authority, as an administration, we're keen to look at a number of different ways to deliver houses. We're not expected to build all of those houses ourselves. There'll be other developers who will be working on a number of different projects who will be building houses themselves. It's about the total number of homes that are built. We believe this administration will make a fair contribution to that number of homes. However, one of the big concerns that I have at the moment is not so much about how we're going to do the homes, but we've made a commitment as a local authority that we've got a particular view on how we should be building that homes and whether we should be building those homes through the HDV. I understand, as it is, that this side agrees with that side on whether or not we should be doing that. And the bigger issue, to my mind, is the fact that as an authority, we are going to be publishing tomorrow a letter from Lend-Lease, a 9-page letter with a substantial set of amendments behind that, which expresses whether or not we as an authority have the independence to make that decision about how we build housing ourselves.
Have you got a supplementary from the Labour side? Councillor Stone?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. You might have just already gone over this a little bit, but could the lead member, or Joe in this case, please explain what strategy the Council is planning to pursue in order to build the 1,000 new council homes as per the Haringey Labour Party manifesto?
Obviously, also one of the reports that are coming to Cabinet tomorrow is on the proposal to set up a wholly owned vehicle. So this was one of the strategies that we recommended as part of some of the work that was undertaken by the scrutiny panel over the last couple of years. So we believe that that will make a significant contribution to meeting that target. It is a challenging target, but if we meet it, then it will be one of the kind of biggest council kind of home building programmes for the last 30 years. We share that target with another borough in London and Newham, and we both believe that we've got the kind of mechanisms in place to be able to deliver on that. So it will be through a number of different, so part of it will be direct build, part of it will be purchasing homes that come through the planning system. So some of the things that Joe was talking about earlier, you know, once we purchase a home through the planning system, it's a council home which will be let at council rents. But also what's significantly important to talk about is Sadiq Khan's commitment to building homes for Londoners programme, which we're going to be making a significant bid towards, and we'll be able to give some more information on that later on in the year. We've also been given a commitment that we'll be getting some support on, you know, purchasing homes and street properties in the run-up to some of the issues that we're facing on Broadwater Farm as well.
Thank you. Right. That concludes the oral questions. Can we receive the answers to written questions as set out in the tabled paper? We now move on to, we have two motions to debate. First, I will ask Councillor Barnes to propose her motion.
It's with pleasure I'm able to propose the first Liberal Democrat motion in our new council, and I'm delighted that the motion in question relates to asking the council to become a London Living Wage accredited employer. And I think from Councillor Tucker's words earlier, I'm probably pushing us a very open door, which means that hopefully we can do this quite quickly because it's hot in here and I think everybody would like to leave quite shortly. It was wonderful to hear from Susanna, and less wonderful to hear about her long working days, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I know from a local community forum that I'm a part of, there's a debate at the moment about a woman who's offered her cleaning services, and the responses from some of the residents have been, well, I only pay X pounds for my cleaner and it's not the London Living Wage. As a Crouch End councillor, I know that people working in the local picture house are going out on strike and calling to be a London Living Wage employer, and I know that the neighbouring art house is already accredited, which is excellent news for those employees. And in fact, local Labour members, some of you yourselves perhaps, have been outside the Crouch End Picture House asking us not to go in there, to boycott it, in order to push them to become a London living wage employer. So it's pretty shameful that Haringey Council has not yet applied for London living wage accreditation, a low-cost investment that would show it values both its residents and the people who work for the council and contract to the council. It's £3,000 a year is the accreditation cost for the Living Wage Foundation, and they would then work with us, as Councillor Tucker referenced and as was referenced in the deputation, to help us get there, if we could even do that and pledge in November in London Living Wage Week. And it's only right that the council, the largest employer in the borough, leads by example, and evidence shows that where the council leads with London Living Wage accreditation, others follow. We've heard the numbers already, but our Labour members in Hackney, they've got 80 accredited businesses, and I think Islington's almost at 150. We've got just 20. It's a little embarrassing. So I commend this motion to the council. I very much hope you take it up. Let's see action and make sure that we are a London Living Wage accredited employer as soon as is possible, and work to that from November this year. Thank you.
Can I call on Councillor Josh Dixon to second, please?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. During the election campaign, I was proud to stand alongside colleagues from both parties. I think all of us are here tonight as well. Both parties represented on Haringey Council, and we made a pledge to Haringey citizens on the living wage. We stood shoulder to shoulder, and we pledged that we would push the council to become an accredited living wage employer with the Living Wage Foundation, and we would do that in time for Living Wage Week 2018. This would ensure that all council employees and third-party contracted staff were paid the London living wage. And today we stand here together again to, I hope, honour that pledge. I'm also delighted that we were joined this evening by Haringey citizens today. The work they do is absolutely vital, and the causes they champion are close to the hearts of many on our side and no doubt on the Labour side as well. I also want to note that we support the amendment put forward by the Labour group this evening. I don't want to indulge too much or for too long into the arguments, as we all know why this matters. In an age of austerity, when many wages are flatlining, it's crucial that we step up and ensure that people working in our borough are given the fair pay they deserve. The impact of bringing in a genuine living wage is not just something that benefits employees, but it benefits the businesses as well. The Living Wage Foundation surveyed their network of businesses and found that 75% agrees that the living wage increased the motivation and retention rates for employees, with the majority also saying that relations between managers and their staff had improved as well. With accreditation, we will be able to go out to our community of businesses and make a clear and credible case for paying their employees the London living wage, making it clear there are benefits for everybody involved. But the time for words is over. We made a pledge, so let's honour it. Thank you.
I've received an amendment to this motion, which I think you've just said you agreed with the amendment, but I'm calling on Councillor Noah Tucker to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Comrade Deputy Mayor and comrades and colleagues. I just want to say something about the nature and the scale of the problem that we face. So very, very briefly about the huge amount of inequality that we have in this borough. It's an inequality of wealth going roughly from west to east, not running in a straight line, but roughly following that geographical situation. It's an inequality of health, it's an inequality of life expectancy, and behind all that we have enormous inequalities in income. And recently, since approximately 2010, when first the coalition came in, followed by the full Tory government, we've had the worst reductions in working people's living standards and their pay since the 1860s. The fact that this is a political choice and not an economic necessity is shown by what has happened to the incomes and wealth of the top 1% in our society, which have more than doubled in the same period. The solution to this, or a large part of the solution, is working people, working class people, organising themselves to unite and defend their interests. And we heard earlier from Susanna, who's an activist in the UVW, a union that is very successfully organising and fighting for the rights of low-paid workers. It's strong trade unions, trade union membership, trade union recognition, and, when necessary, trade union action, which is going to make sure that working class people can actually defend their interests and protect their pay and conditions. What can we do about it? Very importantly, we can use the leverage that we have. We can consider trade union access to the workplace, the right to organise, etc., in our procurement. We can encourage employers to allow unions to organise, and very importantly, we can treat our own workers and our own trade unions with respect and not just consult them, but involve them from the bottom up in our decisions. Can I make one last point about the importance of trade unions? Because it's not just about pay and material living standards. What we face, has been shown very recently, is the rise of bigotry, the extreme right, of prejudice, Islamophobia, and many other ills connected with racism and fascism. And I'm very proud that so many of us in this room were demonstrating, not just on Friday, but also on Saturday, against that appalling phenomenon. Trade unions show another road. They show that when working class people, people in the workplace, of all ethnicities, of all colours, of all creeds, stay strong and stand together, instead of being divided, they can do what's necessary and protect their interests. So let's look after our trade unions, let's encourage trade union membership, and let's use all of our powers to make certain that working class people's interests are advanced and protected. Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed, I know that you're going to second. It would really help the meeting if you could second it formally, because otherwise we're not going to have many people to ask questions and speak.
I've got a few points to make around adult social care specifically, so if that's okay. Sorry, Madam Deputy Chair. So thank you, and I'd like to second the amendment. Sorry, without my phone near the microphone. So I'd like to second the amendment, and as the lead member for Adults and Health and as a trade unionist, I'm keenly aware of the need to achieve London living wage for all workers in this field, both directly employed and for those who deliver services we currently commission. So the Leader of the Council, alongside myself and Councillor Brabazon, at the Haringey Citizens Hustings event earlier in May this year, pledged to become a living wage accredited council, which will bring us in line with our neighbouring Labour-run councils. So in this context, however, talk is cheap, and we need some solid action, which is why our Adult Social Care Commissioning team is currently in the process of looking at a new model of home support. And as part of the new administration's commitment to redesign adult social care, this will eventually include a look at how we deliver this model as we look to new and possible ways to do this, such as insourcing or other means such as cooperative models of delivery, and updates will follow on this. So as part of the new model of home support, we'll be working to implement the London living wage by the end of 2019. This is earlier than 2022, which is the date we pledged in our manifesto, and the Ethical Care Charter, which we signed up to in 2017. We are keen to get on with this and realise the vital importance that this makes to the lives of so many home care workers. Austerity is the reason this hasn't happened yet, and why it proves tricky to do so. But as a Labour Council, we have to work around this and do our best to ensure that we pay a decent wage, because ultimately we expect good quality outcomes for our residents, and we can only achieve those by ensuring we look after those who look after them. I've already met with Haringey citizens, and we have agreed to keep the dialogue going and to continue to work together to achieve our common outcomes, namely a decent living wage for all. And just on the I mean, they're not here now, but just they did mention landlord licensing, and just to say, as a quick note, Councillor Brabazon is leading on the expansion of our landlord licensing scheme, both additional and selective, so there is action being done in that regard as well.
Well, sadly, I have to tell you that we have not got a lot of time left, as you can see by the clock up there. And what I'm going to do basically is ask for one speaker from this side and one speaker from this side, and then I'm going to ask Councillor Barnes to respond. So, who wishes to speak from which side? It's up to you. I mean, if you want, we can move straight to Councillor Barnes winding up. Come on, we're wasting time. Is anybody want
can we move to the vote, please, Chair?
I've had someone's requested to move to the vote. That's a procedural motion. There can be no debate on that. So I need a show of hands. All those in favour of proceeding to the vote. Thank you. Those against? All right. All right. Can I ask Councillor Barnes to... Can I ask Councillor Barnes to wind up and then we'll move to the vote? Is that... Thank you.
Okay. So I think we've identified there's no need to pontificate about this. We are, it sounds, surprisingly, as if we are all in agreement on it, and I'm sorry that Councillor Da Costa did not get to give his maiden speech. So let's move to that vote and let those that need to get to their parties, but make this very important decision to make this council accredited. Sorry? I mean, I can't believe you criticise the social life of your colleagues. Maybe that's because he doesn't yet get paid the London living wage. Well, let's support the motion and get on with it. Thank you.
I'm glad that the debate is ending on such an amicable note. It's really a pleasant experience for me in this council chamber. So now, as you've accepted the amendment, can we agree to vote on the motion as amended? Those in favour of the motion as amended, please show. Those against? That's carried non-com. Oh. Thank you very much for making this, as I said, a really nice evening for me.